This isn't revenge. It's a warning.
The notification sound on my wife's phone could wake the dead, and at 2:47 a.m., it practically raised me from mine. Kendra didn't even flinch. She just rolled over, grabbed the device with the practice motion of someone who'd been expecting it, and started typing furiously under the covers. Work emergency? I mumbled into my pillow, though we both knew her marketing firm didn't exactly deal in life-or-death campaigns. She whispered, her fingers dancing across the screen like she was composing the next great American novel instead of whatever late-night conversation couldn't wait until morning. I'm Nick Dalton, and I fix computers for a living. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps me sharp enough to notice when something's off in the digital world. What I was slower to pick up on were the glitches in my own marriage. The texting continued for another 20 minutes. I know because I watched the clock, counting each passing minute like a man waiting for his execution. When Kendra finally put the phone down, she was smiling in the dark. I could see it in the reflection of our bedroom mirror, that satisfied little smirk she used to reserve for me. Everything okay at the office? I asked again. Just Tessa being dramatic about her dating life, Kendra said smoothly. You know how she gets. I did know Tessa. Kendra's best friend since college, a socialite who treated gossip like currency and had never sent a text after 10 p.m. in the 8 years I'd known her. But I didn't say that. Instead, I filed it away in the growing folder in my brain labeled Things That Don't Add Up. The next morning, Kendra was already gone when I woke up. Her coffee mug sat in the sink, lipstick stain on the rim, a shade I didn't recognize. Cherry red instead of her usual soft pink. Another file for the folder. I was debugging a server crash for a local law firm when my phone buzzed. Jules Martinez, my best friend since high school and the only ex-cop I knew who'd quit the force to install security systems because, in his words, I got tired of arriving after the crime. Coffee? His text read. Always, I replied. We met at Murphy's Diner, the kind of place that served coffee strong enough to strip paint and didn't judge you for ordering breakfast at 2 p.m. Jules was already there, looking like he'd been awake for days, which, knowing him, he probably had been. You look like heck, he said by way of greeting. Kendra's been acting weird, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. Secretive. Different. Jules raised an eyebrow. Different how? Late-night texts, new clothes. Yesterday I found a receipt for Morton's Steakhouse in her purse. We haven't been to Morton's since our anniversary 2 years ago. Maybe she's planning a surprise? For who? The question came out more bitter than I intended. Jules studied my face with those sharp eyes that had made him a good cop. You want me to look into it? No, I said quickly. Then after a pause. Maybe, I don't know. Nick, if you think she's cheating, I don't think anything yet. That's the problem. But I was lying, and we both knew it. The signs were there, had been there for weeks. The new gym membership she'd never used in front of me. The sudden interest in working late, the way she'd started closing her laptop whenever I walked into the room. That evening, I decided to test a theory. I came home early and suggested we order Chinese food and watch a movie, something we used to do every Friday night before life got complicated. I can't tonight, Kendra said, not looking up from her phone. Girls' night with Tessa and the crew. Again? Didn't you just go out Wednesday? That was different. This is Tessa's birthday celebration. Tessa's birthday was in March. It was October. Have fun, I said, and meant it in the way you mean break a leg to an actor. She left at 7, dressed in a black dress I'd never seen before, wearing perfume that smelled like promises she wasn't making to me. I watched from the window as she got into her car, then immediately called Jules. Operation Catch a Cheater is a go, I said. Jesus, Nick, you sure about this? I'm sure I need to know. An hour later, Jules and I were parked outside Hendrick's bar, watching my wife laugh at jokes told by a guy who definitely wasn't Tessa. He was younger than me, broader in the shoulders, with the kind of perfectly styled hair that required more product than most women used. He drove an Audi leased, I'd bet money on it, and had the confident posture of someone who'd never had to debug a system crash at 3 a.m. to keep the lights on. That's Tyler Reed, Jules said, squinting through his binoculars. Works at Kendra's firm, marketing coordinator. How do you know that? I know things, it's what you pay me for. We watched them for 2 hours. Watched her lean in when he talked. Watched her laugh too hard at his jokes. Watched her put her hand on his arm in a way that was definitely not professional networking. I've seen enough, I said finally. What's the plan? I stared at my wife through the bar window, feeling something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest. I'm going to destroy them both. The next few days, I played the perfect husband. Made coffee in the morning, asked about her day, pretended not to notice when she showered immediately after coming home from her overtime shifts. All while Jules and I planned our reconnaissance mission, like we were preparing for war. And maybe we were. Jules had connections from his cop days, and I had skills that went beyond fixing crashed hard drives. Together, we made a dangerous team. Him with his street smarts and investigative training, me with my ability to make technology do things it wasn't supposed to do. His name's Tyler Reed, Jules reported over coffee Thursday morning. 29, lives in those new condos downtown, drives a 2023 Audi A4 leased, like you guessed. Has a roommate named Greg who sells insurance, and smokes enough weed to supply a small music festival. How long has this been going on? Best I can tell, about 6 weeks. Started right around the time Kendra got that promotion. The promotion. She'd been so excited, had insisted we celebrate at that expensive restaurant downtown. The same restaurant where, apparently, she'd been celebrating other things with Tyler. I want to meet him, I said. Nick, not to hurt him, just to see what I'm dealing with. Jules looked skeptical, but he knew better than to argue when I got that tone. He works out at Fitness Plus on Grant Street, usually there around 6 p.m. That evening, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in months, going to the gym. I'd let my membership lapse when work got busy, but they were happy to let me pay for a day pass. Amazing how easy it is to slip back into old routines when you're motivated by the right kind of anger. Tyler was exactly what I'd expected, the kind of guy who grunted loudly during his workouts and took selfies between sets. He had one of those motivational quote tattoos on his forearm. Success is the best revenge. The irony wasn't lost on me. I positioned myself at the bench press next to his and waited for my opportunity. It came when he was struggling with a weight that was clearly too heavy for him, his form getting sloppy as he tried to impress the college girls doing cardio nearby. Need a spot? I asked. Yeah, thanks, man. I helped him through his set, playing the friendly gym buddy while studying his face up close. He had the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to work too hard for anything. The kind of guy who'd probably never had his heart broken because he was usually the one doing the breaking. I'm Tyler, he said, sitting up and extending his hand. Nick, I replied, shaking it and noting the expensive watch on his wrist. You work around here? Marketing firm downtown, Kendra Associates. You know it? Oh, I knew it. Heard of it. Good company? Best job I've ever had, he said with a grin that made me want to rearrange his perfectly straight teeth. Great benefits, if you know what I mean. I knew exactly what he meant. We made small talk for another 10 minutes. He was everything I'd feared, charming, confident, and completely oblivious to the fact that he was flirting with disaster. When he mentioned grabbing drinks later with this amazing woman from work, I had to excuse myself before I did something that would land me in jail. I called Jules from the parking lot. How'd it go? He asked. He's exactly the kind of a hole you'd expect. And Jules, he has no idea who I am. That's good, right? Gives us an advantage. That's what I'm counting on. That night, Kendra came home at 11:30, claiming she'd been at a client dinner. She smelled like expensive cologne and lies. When she kissed me goodnight, I tasted betrayal on her lips. How was your day? She asked, settling into bed beside me. Productive, I said. Very productive. The next morning, I started my real work. While Kendra was at her early meeting, I was in our home office, using skills I'd developed over 15 years in IT to dig into the digital footprints of my wife's affair. Her laptop was password protected, but I'd set up the home network. Getting in was child's play. What I found there chilled me to the core, not because it was explicit, but because it was intimate. Messages that went back weeks, filled with inside jokes and shared secrets. Plans for weekend getaways and discussions about when the time is right. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future. The worst part was reading Kendra's messages, seeing a side of her personality I hadn't seen in years. She was playful, flirtatious, alive in a way she hadn't been with me in months. It was like watching a stranger wear my wife's face. I screenshotted everything, stored it in an encrypted folder, and began planning my response. If they wanted to play games, I'd show them what a real player looked like. Jules came over that afternoon, finding me in the office surrounded by printouts and notes. Jesus, Nick, you look like you're planning to invade a small country. Something like that, I said, not looking up from my work. I need you to do something for me. Name it. I need you to find out everything you can about Tyler Reed, where he goes, who he talks to, what his weaknesses are. I want to know him better than his own mother does. And then what? I finally looked up, and Jules took a step back at whatever he saw in my eyes. Then we're going to teach him that some games have consequences. By the following Monday, Jules and I had compiled a dossier on Tyler Reed that would have impressed the FBI. The kid was an open book. Social media accounts with minimal privacy settings, a predictable routine, and the kind of arrogant confidence that made him sloppy about covering his tracks. He lived in Unit 412 at the Meridian condos, drove his leased Audi like it was a Ferrari, and had a weakness for expensive scotch and cheap thrills. His roommate Greg was exactly as advertised, an insurance salesman who spent more on marijuana than most people spent on groceries. But most importantly, Tyler had no idea what he was dealing with. His building has smart locks, I told Jules as we sat in my office reviewing our intelligence, connected to the same network as the building's other systems. Security cameras, elevator controls, even the fire alarm system. Please tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. I'm not going to hurt anyone, I said. But if someone were to accidentally trigger the fire alarm in his building at, say, 3 a.m. every night for a week, that wouldn't be my fault, would it? Jules shook his head. You're playing with fire, Nick. No, I'm playing with Tyler. Fire would be too easy. That night, I put the first phase of my plan into motion. While Kendra was at another client dinner, I'd stopped pretending to believe her lies. I was in our basement setting up equipment that would make the next few weeks very interesting for Mr. Tyler Reed. The beauty of smart home technology is that it's only as secure as its weakest link. And Tyler, like most people his age, had connected everything in his condo to his network without bothering to change the default passwords. At exactly 3:17 a.m., every smart device in Tyler's apartment came alive at once. His sound system blasted death metal at maximum volume. His smart lights strobed like a disco. His coffee maker started brewing. His robotic vacuum began its cleaning cycle, bumping into furniture and walls. And his car alarm, connected to his phone's app, began wailing in the parking garage 4 floors below. I imagined him stumbling around in his underwear, trying to figure out why his entire life had suddenly become a technological nightmare. The thought made me smile for the first time in weeks. The next day, I made a point of being extra attentive to Kendra. Brought her coffee in bed, asked about her work, played the role of the loving husband while she lied through her teeth about her evening plans. You seem happy today, she said, studying my face with the suspicious look of someone with a guilty conscience. Why wouldn't I be? I have a beautiful wife, a good job, and all the time in the world to focus on the things that matter to me. She didn't like the way I said that last part. Good. That evening, while she was at her book club, a book club that apparently met at Tyler's favorite bar, I escalated my campaign. This time, it wasn't just his smart home systems. I'd found his social media accounts, his email, even his Netflix password. By the time I was done, Tyler Reed was going to think he was losing his mind. His Instagram account started posting embarrassing throwback photos from his college days. Pictures of him passed out at parties, wearing ridiculous outfits, caught in compromising positions with people who definitely weren't Kendra. His dating app profiles updated themselves with honest descriptions of his personality flaws. His streaming services began recommending shows about infidelity and betrayal. But the masterpiece was his work email. Nothing obvious, nothing that would get him fired immediately. Just small things. Replies sent to the wrong people, meeting invitations for appointments that didn't exist, autocorrect failures that made him sound unprofessional. Jules called me the next morning, laughing so hard he could barely speak. Whatever you did to this guy, it's working. My buddy at the police department says they got 3 noise complaints about his building last night. And get this, someone called in a wellness check because his neighbors thought he was having a breakdown. I have no idea what you're talking about, I said innocently. Sure you don't, just be careful, okay? This kind of thing can escalate quickly. He was right, but I was past the point of caring about escalation. Every night, Kendra came home later and later, her excuses getting more elaborate and less believable. Every morning, she looked at me like I was a stranger she was trying to figure out. The old Nick would have confronted her, would have demanded the truth, and tried to work things out. But the old Nick was dead, ended by late-night text messages and lipstick stains on coffee cups. The new Nick was just getting started. That Friday, I decided it was time to take things to the next level. While Kendra was getting ready for another girls' night, I was preparing for the most important performance of my life. Have fun tonight, I said, kissing her cheek as she headed for the door. "I will," she said, and for the first time in weeks, she wasn't lying. Neither was I. But my idea of fun and hers were about to become very different things. Saturday morning came with the kind of autumn chill that made you want to stay in bed, but I was up before dawn, finalizing the details of what Jules had started calling Operation Homewrecker. The name was juvenile, but it fit. Kendra was still asleep, probably exhausted from her girls' night that had lasted until 2 a.m. I'd heard her stumble in, trying to be quiet. But after 15 years of marriage, you know the sound of your spouse's footsteps. You also know when they're trying too hard to seem normal. I made coffee and sat in the kitchen, scrolling through the evidence I'd collected. Photos of her and Tyler at restaurants across town, screenshots of their text conversations, credit card statements showing purchases at lingerie stores I'd never seen her shop at. The funny thing about betrayal is how obvious it becomes once you start looking. All those little inconsistencies that you explain away when you trust someone suddenly form a perfect damning picture when you don't. My phone buzzed. Jules. "It's showtime," his text read. "Target acquired." I looked out the kitchen window and saw Tyler's Audi parked across the street. Bold move, parking right in front of the house. Either he was stupider than I thought, or he'd reached the point of not caring who saw him. I was betting on stupid. Kendra came downstairs 20 minutes later, already dressed and checking her phone. She barely looked at me as she grabbed her purse. "Going somewhere?" I asked casually. "Coffee with Tessa. We're planning her sister's baby shower." Tessa's sister had her baby shower 3 months ago. I was there. "Have fun," I said, and watched her leave through the front window. She walked straight to Tyler's car. I waited exactly 5 minutes, then called Jules. "They're moving," I said. "Roger that. Phase 2 is go." Phase 2 had taken weeks to set up, and it was beautiful in its simplicity. While I'd been playing with Tyler's smart home systems, Jules had been doing what he did best, gathering intelligence and making connections. It turned out Tyler Reed had made enemies. His arrogant attitude and habit of taking credit for other people's work had earned him a reputation at Kendra Associates. His tendency to hit on every attractive woman in the office, regardless of their relationship status, had made him particularly unpopular with the married employees. Jules had spent the last week making friends with these disgruntled coworkers, particularly Monica Henderson from HR, who'd been looking for a reason to discipline Tyler since he'd made an inappropriate comment about her daughter during the company picnic. "Monica's very interested in seeing those screenshots you showed me," Jules had reported earlier in the week, especially the ones where Tyler talks about conquering the married women at work. Today was the day Monica was going to get her evidence, but first I had a more personal confrontation to handle. I drove to Riverside Park, where Jewel was waiting with a clear view of the parking area. Tyler's Audi was there, along with Kendra's Honda. They were sitting on a bench by the lake, close enough to be intimate, far enough from other people to think they had privacy. They didn't see me coming until I was 10 feet away. "Beautiful morning for a walk," I said conversationally. Kendra's face went white. Tyler looked confused, then annoyed, like I was interrupting something important. "Nick," Kendra stammered, "what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same question. Funny, you don't look like Tessa." Tyler stood up, puffing out his chest in a display of dominance that might have been intimidating if I hadn't spent the last month learning everything there was to know about him. "Who the heck are you?" he demanded. "I'm Nick Dalton," I said, extending my hand with a smile. "Kendra's husband. We met at the gym, remember?" The color drained from his face as the pieces clicked together. To his credit, he recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. "Look, man, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like you're having a romantic morning with my wife after she lied to me about where she was going." "What does it look like to you?" Kendra found her voice. "Nick, please, let me explain." "Explain what? How long you've been lying to me? How many times you've looked me in the eye and told me you were somewhere else? Or maybe you'd like to explain why you're planning weekend getaways with your coworker while I'm at home thinking we're working through a rough patch." Tyler stepped forward, trying to insert himself between us. "Hey, nobody planned for this to happen. Sometimes people just connect, you know?" I laughed, and something in the sound made both of them take a step back. "Connect? Is that what you call it?" "Tyler, my friend, let me tell you about connection. Connection is 15 years of marriage. Connection is holding someone's hair while they're sick. Connection is working double shifts to pay for their mother's funeral. Connection is not sleeping with your coworker and calling it destiny." "Nick," Kendra started, "I'm not done." My voice was calm, which seemed to scare them more than if I'd been shouting. Tyler, you made a mistake when you decided to mess with my family. You thought you were dealing with some boring IT guy who'd roll over and let you take what was mine. But here's what you didn't know about me. I don't roll over for anyone. I pulled out my phone and showed them a screenshot of one of their text conversations. Tyler's face went gray. How did you? I know things, Tyler. I know about your smart home system that's been malfunctioning. I know about your work email problems. I know about your social media accounts posting things you don't remember posting. And I know that in about 30 minutes, Monica Henderson from your HR department is going to receive a very interesting package of evidence about your workplace behavior. You can't do that, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I already did. See, the thing about technology is that it keeps records of everything. Every text, every email, every photo. And when you're stupid enough to use company equipment for personal communications, well, that makes things very easy for someone like me. Kendra was crying now, but they weren't the tears of someone who was sorry. They were the tears of someone who'd been caught. What do you want? Tyler asked. I want you to disappear, I said simply. I want you to stay away from my wife, stay away from my house, and stay away from my life. And if you don't, I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of man you are. And if I do, then maybe your life goes back to normal. Maybe your smart home stops having technical difficulties. Maybe your work problems clear up. Maybe you get to keep your job and what's left of your reputation. Tyler looked at Kendra, then back at me. He was young, but he wasn't stupid. He could see the writing on the wall. This is crazy, he said, but he was already backing away. No, I replied. Crazy would be what I do to you if you don't take my very reasonable offer. He left without another word, practically running back to his car. Kendra watched him go, then turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Part fear, part respect, part something that might have been attraction. What happens now? She asked. Now we go home, I said. And you decide whether you want to be married to me or married to the fantasy of what your life could be with someone else. But Kendra, whatever you decide it honestly. No more lies, no more games. No more, Tyler? She nodded, still crying, and followed me back to my car. As we drove home in silence, I caught her looking at me in the rearview mirror. The old Nick was gone, and she was seeing the new one for the first time. I had a feeling she liked what she saw. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my marriage. Kendra sat in the passenger seat, alternating between staring out the window and stealing glances at me like she was trying to figure out who I'd become. I knew the feeling. When we pulled into our driveway, she finally spoke. How long have you known? Long enough. Are you going to leave me? I turned off the engine and looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. But there was something different in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before Tyler Reed walked into her life. That depends, I said. On what? On whether the woman I married is still in there somewhere, or if she died when you decided our marriage was worth less than a few months of excitement with a 29-year-old. She started crying again. But these tears were different. These were the tears of someone who was genuinely sorry, not just sorry they'd been caught. I don't know what happened to me, she whispered. I don't know how I became someone who could do this to you. I do, I said. You became someone who stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as an obstacle to what you thought you wanted. We sat in the car for another 10 minutes while she cried, and I processed the fact that my marriage might actually be salvageable. The old Nick would have been relieved, would have been ready to forgive and forget and pretend none of this had ever happened. But the old Nick was gone, and the new Nick had standards. If we're going to fix this, I said finally, it's going to be on my terms. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. First, you're going to tell me everything. Every lie, every meeting, every time you chose him over me. I want to know all of it. Nick, everything, Kendra, or this conversation ends right here. She took a shaky breath and started talking. It took 2 hours and 3 cups of coffee, but she told me everything. How it started with innocent flirting at a company happy hour. How Tyler had made her feel young and desirable in a way she hadn't felt in years. How the thrill of sneaking around had taken over her life. How she kept going back, even when she knew it was wrong. How she'd convinced herself that what I didn't know wouldn't hurt me. The worst part, she said when she was finished, is that I knew it was wrong the whole time. Every lie I told you, every time I came home and pretended everything was normal, I knew I was destroying something good for something that was never going to last. Then why didn't you stop? because stopping would have meant admitting what I'd become, and I wasn't ready to face that. I understood that better than I wanted to admit. I'd spent the last month becoming someone I didn't recognize either. The difference was, I liked who I'd become. "What happens to Tyler?" she asked. "Tyler's not your problem anymore. He's mine." My phone buzzed, a text from Jules. "Package delivered. Monica says to tell you that Kendra Associates takes workplace harassment very seriously." I showed Kendra the message. She closed her eyes. He's going to lose his job. He's going to lose more than that if he doesn't learn to keep his hands to himself. You planned all of this. I planned to protect what was mine. Tyler Reed made the mistake of thinking I was weak. A lot of people make that mistake. She looked at me with something that might have been admiration. "When did you become so ruthless?" "When my wife started sleeping with her coworker and lying to my face about it." The words hit her like a physical blow, but I wasn't done. "You want to know what the real tragedy is, Kendra? It's not that you had an affair. People make mistakes. People get tempted. People do stupid things. The tragedy is that you looked at me, at us, and decided we weren't worth fighting for. You decided I wasn't worth the truth. That's not true. It is true. For 2 months, you woke up next to me every morning and chose to lie. You kissed me goodnight and chose to lie. You made love to me and chose to lie. Do you have any idea what that does to a person?" She was crying again, but I was past the point where her tears could move me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Nick. I know I don't deserve it, but please, please give me a chance to make this right." I studied her face, looking for any sign that this was just another manipulation, another lie designed to get her what she wanted. But all I saw was genuine remorse and the kind of fear that comes from realizing you've lost something irreplaceable. "One chance," I said finally, "but it's going to cost you. Anything. You're going to quit your job." "What?" "You're going to quit Kendra Associates and you're going to find work somewhere else. Somewhere that doesn't have Tyler Reed or anyone like him. Somewhere you can remember who you used to be before you decided our marriage was disposable." "Nick, that's my career." "Your career is what gave you the opportunity to betray me. Your career is where you met him, where you planned your lies, where you decided I was worth less than a few months of excitement. So your career is what you're going to sacrifice to save our marriage." She was quiet for a long time, processing what I was asking of her. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, I'll quit. And you're going to therapy. Individual therapy, couples therapy, whatever it takes to figure out how you became someone who could do this to us." "Okay. And Kendra, if you ever, and I mean ever, lie to me again about anything, even something small, even something you think doesn't matter, this marriage is over. No discussion, no second chances, no working it out. Over." She nodded, understanding the weight of what I was saying. "Can you forgive me?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I'm willing to try. The question is, are you willing to earn it?" 3 days later, Tyler Reed was fired from Kendra Associates for inappropriate conduct and fostering a toxic workplace. 2 days after that, Kendra submitted her resignation. A week later, we started couples therapy. It wasn't a happy ending, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, when everything you thought you knew about your life turns out to be a lie, a beginning is enough. The old Nick would have been grateful just to have his wife back, would have been willing to pretend none of it had ever happened. But the new Nick had learned something important. Sometimes the only way to save something worth keeping is to be willing to destroy everything that isn't. And as I watched Tyler Reed clean out his desk through the window of Kendra Associates, I realized that the man who'd tried to steal my life had actually given me something invaluable. He'd given me back my strength.